This is Hot Chocolate with Paul. I have Doug Chanin with me. He is a guitar player extraordinaire, and we first met when he was forming the group Blues Circle. So we started the group, and what's Blues Circle all about?
2 years ago? Oh, okay. Well, as you know, but for our audience here, Blues Circle was kind of like a brainchild of myself and our harmonica player, Jerry Loffer. We had kind of played together in another group just casually, and when that group broke apart, I had this idea of playing Chicago blues, which I love, and I knew that Jerry was into that, so I can't remember whether Jerry called me or I called him, and we were just having a conversation, and he said, well, what are you up to now? And I said, well, I really want to make a blues band. And he said, perfect, I'm in, you know. So that's how it started, and then we got together, and you were actually probably our next recruit. We just started putting out on Facebook, making a blues band. We're looking for a drummer, we're looking for a singer, we're looking for everybody, pretty much. And then you came on board. And then next, I think, was you and our bass player, Mike, who is no longer our bass player, but our original bass player. Yep. He's off. He's in the military now, so he's off in Guam, I think. But then Opal, our singer, who's really the star of the band as far as I'm concerned, she came along. It's kind of a funny story with her because we were looking for a singer, and I put the ad out on Facebook. You know, we've got this blues band, we need a singer. And she liked my post. And I was, oh, that's funny, I don't know this person, and they liked my post. So I kind of looked and I said, who is this Opal Rose? And I clicked on her profile, and there was a video on her page of her singing, I think she was singing St. James Infirmary, which is one of the songs that we do. And as soon as I heard it, I said, this is the girl we need for our band. So I sent her a note, and I said, I see you liked our post. Would you like to, I said audition, but I knew she was going to be in the band. So she said, well, I was thinking about it, but I wasn't really sure if I wanted to get back into a band. She had been in another band that had broken up. It's kind of like a relationship, I guess. And she said, okay, well, I'll get together with you guys and see how it goes. And she got together with us, as you remember, in your garage.
Yeah.
And immediately, I think we're all kind of looking at each other like, yep, she's the one. So that's kind of, and Blues Circle, the idea, like the name-wise, it was really, I knew from the beginning, I was never really uncomfortable. I kind of became the de facto leader because I started it, but I was never really totally comfortable being the quote-unquote leader. So I made Blues Circle as the name, thinking it's going to be like a circle. There's not going to be an official leader. It's going to be a group effort. And I thought the idea of the circle kind of encapsulated that. So that was sort of a cop-out on my part because I didn't want to make it the Opal Rose Band or the Doug Chanin Band or anything like that. I wanted it to kind of be a collaborative effort. So that's where the name came from.
Right.
But,
and now we have Greg in the band.
Right. Got Greg on bass. Greg is our bass player, also sound man. And just recently brought on Gordy on guitar. And we've got Bill on drums because you moved on to, now you're famous doing this. So
I don't know about famous. Yeah, I think what happened with me was I was approaching retirement and looking at another project that I was interested in, and it just seemed to work out right that you would have somebody more reliable than what my schedule would be.
You're a busy guy.
Yeah. But the ironic thing is, once I actually retired, I found out it doesn't mean I have unlimited time.
Most of my retired friends are busier than I am, and I have a 9-to-5 job. And, so I find that kind of amazing. But it seems to be when people retire, they end up busier than ever.
Yeah. So how would you describe the music for Blues Circle? What songs?
It's a little bit eclectic. I mean, originally the idea was Chicago blues, which, if everybody's not familiar, is kind of a specific type of blues. In general, I mean, the generalizations you could make, everybody's probably familiar with sort of like a rock and roll blues, like might be a little more Stevie Ray Vaughan or something like that, more modern blues. And then there's Delta blues, which is kind of the original, more the original blues. That's a guy with a acoustic guitar in a cotton field, very basic blues. And then the way it evolved in a nutshell is basically the Delta blues guys were down south, Mississippi, that kind of thing. And a lot of them, due to conditions in the south or, economic conditions as well, moved up north, and a lot of them came to Chicago. And when they came to Chicago, they went from the acoustic to the electric, and they started, electric guitars and things like that. And they had a very sound that was very distinct from Delta blues, in that more electric. And guys like B.B. King, that most people probably know. Buddy Guy is another one. He just retired, which is amazing. So those guys are more the Chicago blues sound. So we started Blue Circle, was kind of envisioned as a Chicago blues band, because we've got 6 members. We're a little big. To Delta blues would probably be 1 or 2 people would do it. So it's not, it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I've always kind of been in love with it. And I shouldn't say always, I wasn't always, but it's really grown on me over the years, and I'm a big fan. So I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about bands, and he was talking about how, you could play in a pop band, you could play in 80s bands are big and everything, and I'm not one of those guys that I have to play something I really like listening to. And I'm not really a big 90s rock guy or anything like that. So I like listening to Chicago blues, and that's what I like playing. So
I know my wife and I like to go out dancing a lot, and so we get exposed to a lot of bands in and around the Rochester area. But the one thing that really stands out to me about a lot of bands is there are some bands that are very focused on what they as musicians like to play. And they don't always get the biggest following.
Right.
But they really truly enjoy what they're doing. And then there's other bands that I would call commercial, because they're always looking for the songs that get the best response. They're the most popular songs. And the one thing that my wife and I complain about is, there's so many classic rock bands out there, but my wife and I complain they're all playing the same thing.
Well, I feel like it's all valid. I don't want to be one of those guys that tells other people what they should or shouldn't play, but I'm one of those people. It's kind of funny because I know it's a niche, and I know that there's only so many places that are going to book a blues band. But I remember when we were looking for another guitar player and some other musicians, more than one person saying to me, well, if you played this, you'd get a much bigger following. And, I thought about it, I was like, you know what? I don't really care if we have a big following or not. I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I think everybody else enjoys it. I hope they do. And you know what? If there's 5 people in the place and they're really digging it, that's good enough for me. So,
yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about it. I know it's not the most, not going to get rich, that's for sure,
Yeah, I think we all recognize that none of us are going to get rich doing music around here.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen, I'm sure some of these tribute bands probably do quite well, know, but I can't see myself playing one artist's work or and if I did it, I'd want to do it well, so I'd really have to dig in and try and duplicate whatever sound I'm trying to, if we did a Stevie Ray Vaughan tribute or something like that, be a heck of a lot of work. The way we do it now, it's very, as you know, super improvised. We take the basic skeleton of the song and we make it our own, and it's not going to sound like the record. It's going to sound like us, our interpretation of that, and it's much more fun for me because I don't have to study every note that was played in the solo, or I just kind of take the bare bones of it, and everybody does, and sort of makes it their own, which I think is fun.
So what's your background in music?
Well, it's kind of a long, convoluted story. It's kind of funny. It's funny to me, but I really wanted a guitar when I was probably in my mid to late teens, probably 16, I'm thinking. And, bugged my parents to buy me a guitar. It's a pretty common story. Thought it would be fun and a good way to meet girls. That's most people I know that got into guitar when they were teenagers. That was the motivation. So my mother, I described her exactly the guitar I wanted. told her where to buy it. It was Sam Ash. I grew up in Brooklyn. There was a Sam Ash in Brooklyn. I described it to her exactly what I wanted. And I remember Christmas morning, I'm looking, and there's no guitar under the, you could tell I'm looking under the tree. There's nothing that looks like a guitar. Something like, well, I didn't get my guitar. And she ended up, I think she gave me $50 or something like that and said, this is for your guitar. So back then, you could buy a guitar for $50, a cheap guitar. So I ran to Sam Ash. I bought my guitar. I probably played that guitar between maybe about the age of 16 and the age of 20. And so not a super long time, maybe 4 years or so. And then I met my wife, went away to college, met my wife, and you know how that goes. It started collecting dust, put it away, never touched it. And then probably a little before COVID hit, hadn't touched it in years, my wife wanted to buy, she's a sewer and she makes her own clothes, I think you know that, and she wanted to buy a super expensive sewing machine. And at first I said, absolutely not, cannot afford it, too much money. And she wore me down. And finally I thought about it, and I felt bad about it later because I thought, life's short, let's buy the sewing machine. But I said, but I'm getting something, if you get a toy, I get a toy. And she's like, well, what do you want? I didn't really know what I wanted, and I thought about it, and I said, you know what, I'm going to get another guitar. I'm going to buy a guitar and take up guitar again. This was probably about 4 or 5 years ago. So I bought another guitar and I started playing again and got into it. And once I got comfortable enough, then I looked out on Facebook for other people to play with, started jamming with other people, met Jerry, and then that's how that whole thing happened. Jerry and I got together and started a blues band. So, yeah.
Is that these guitars back here?
I sold the original guitar I had when I was a teenager. I actually gave to a friend of mine whose daughter was learning to play guitar. He gave it back to me, like literally probably 20 years later, gave it back to me, but it wasn't really playable. So I sold that one, and I bought a PRS, which is what that yellow one there is, but it was a different one. So when I first started playing the blues, I didn't really know what kind of guitar I wanted. I wasn't sure what would sound good. So I bought the PRS first, because I got a good price on it. And then I figured out that yellow guitar is similar to what one of my guitar heroes, John Mayer, plays in Dead & Company. So I bought that guitar. I traded the original PRS. I bought that one because I wanted to be like John Mayer. I still like that guitar. That's kind of my backup guitar. And then as I was playing blues, I really started getting into guys like Muddy Waters and stuff. And when I looked at what those guys played, like Eric Clapton, Muddy Waters, they were all Stratocaster guys. So I said, well, I have to try a Stratocaster just because that's what all my heroes play. So I went to the House of Guitars where I bought that, and I tried a Stratocaster and immediately fell in love with that guitar. So that's when I bought the blue one. That's probably about 2 years ago. Well, maybe not even. But so the Stratocaster is like kind of my number one now, and the PRS is my number two. And the acoustic is just, I haven't really done a lot with it yet, but we've been talking about adding a few acoustic songs. So that's probably going to be coming out pretty soon. So, but it's a very personal thing. Everybody I know has all my guitar, our other guitarist, Gordy, he has a Telecaster and he likes Telecasters. And it's a little like, it's such a personal thing. Everybody's got their, when I first bought, a guitar after years of not playing, I asked around, and I had more than one person, you got to get a Telecaster, you're going to play blues, you want a Telecaster. So I bought a Telecaster originally, and just never really fit right. It's almost like a glove. It's got to feel good in your hands. And as soon as I got that one, I was like, yep, that's what I need. That's my guitar. So for now, I might change my mind in a year and try something else. I imagine it's a lot like drums. It's very, everybody's got their favorites, and you can't really tell somebody else. When I go online, I always see people, what kind of guitar should I buy, or what should I, and really nobody is qualified to answer that question. You have to go and try them out, and one of them will speak to you.
Yeah, very, very personal.
Yes.
A music instrument becomes an extension of yourself.
Yeah, and you know it when you hear it. I hate to make these analogies because they're so corny and everything, but it's a little like a girlfriend or something. It's like when it's the right one, you'll know it.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
true. I know when it came to my own drums, the kit that I had when Blues Circle first started had a 24-inch bass drum, and it was fine while it was just sitting in the house. But then I discovered that it was too bulky to be able to move it around.
I remember that.
And then I got the idea that I should get something smaller. And hearing some other bands playing out and seeing some smaller bass drums, I was pretty impressed with how they sounded.
Now, it sounds like you do the same thing I do, where you kind of look at what other people who you want to emulate, what are you playing, what are you doing, and, imitation, I guess. You start out by, imitating your heroes, and then little by little you kind of get your own taste, but...
Yeah, I do. Charlie Watts is probably the drummer that I emulate the most.
That's funny, because I'm a real Keith Richards, Ronnie Wood fan, so we should make a Stones tribute band.
Yeah, there you go. So I've always liked Charlie Watts. I like the fact that he uses a 4-piece set. And, for me, simpler, less is more.
Yeah.
Less is more.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
Yeah. And I don't know if you knew this, but back in the day when I was playing with the previous band, I used to get myself motivated by listening to Rolling Stones songs on my way to a gig.
Oh, no, you never told me that.
And then after the gig was over, I'm like, all right, that's enough rock and roll. Let's listen to some big band music.
Well, you reminded me of when you talked about the simplicity. That's the other thing I kind of learned in this journey when I took the guitar back up. I bought this expensive, well, not that expensive, but I bought a guitar amplifier. It had all the bells and whistles, the digital stuff, all the different effects you could dial in and everything. And I really struggled with that thing for about a year, and then finally I realized, you know what I need? I need like your simple volume gain, maybe some reverb, nothing fancy. And I went with a much simpler amplifier, Fender Deluxe Reverb, super simple, not a lot of bells and whistles. And that's exactly what I needed. Like all that fancy digital stuff was not really, I think for some people it's probably exactly what they want, but for me, I like to go super simple. I don't use a lot of pedals. I just like the sound of the guitar,
Yeah. For me, the current bands that I'm playing in are marching bands, and just with things going on with my schedule, I think that's just the way it's going to be for the time being. But what I really like about playing a snare drum in a marching band is I just sling it up and I'm ready to play.
Yeah.
No setup and tear down.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. That's, I like playing with other people, which is probably the only reason I haven't really jumped into the acoustic. Because I just like the idea of, I like having 3 or 4 other guys to play with and everything. Yeah. The electric just kind of lends itself to that more. But.
Yeah. I've always admired acoustic guitar singers who just take their guitar and wherever they want to go, they just sit down and they start playing and singing if they're
That is a major advantage. I wish I could sing. Yeah, firsthand I can't sing. But,
Well, I don't claim to be much of a singer myself, but as you know, I like to do
keep meaning to work on it. That's like one of my bucket list things is, and I honestly, it's probably hard to believe if you hear me sing, but I honestly have gotten much better than I was. I've learned over time, like techniques and stuff that people have shown me. Yeah. But I'm not definitely, singing's not I would only if I really got into the acoustic, I'd feel almost like I have to sing, you kind of have to sing if you're going to do that, but which is why I don't do a lot of acoustic.
I never sang until my wife exposed me to karaoke. I mean, I've listened to karaoke before, but I never wanted to do it myself until I saw how she was having fun with it. And so one day when I think there were less than 10 people in a bar, at a karaoke bar, I got up the nerve to try it. And I have hearing loss, moderate hearing loss. And the thing for me was I could never tell if I was on key or not. And then somebody did give me some tips about how to tell if you're on key or not. And I've been following some of that. So sometimes I can tell if I'm on key, but if I'm not on key, I don't know what I have to do to get on key.
Well, something that helped me a lot, again, I'm still not a very good singer in my opinion, and other people's as well, I think, but something that helped me a lot is I found a video of a guitar player on YouTube who had tips for people who want to play guitar and sing. And one of the things that I was always trying to like sort of get my volume super high, and the best tip I got was sing at a volume you're comfortable with, and don't try and go louder. Like, don't try and get over the drums or whatever, and I did realize like a lot of the reason I didn't like my singing was when I tried to increase the volume, I couldn't stay in tune, or I couldn't. So now when I sing, my volume is extremely low, and it improves it quite a bit. And I don't really know why that works, but it's when I try to hit a higher volume that it falls apart, So I hit low volume, it can almost talk sometimes, and strum your guitar and talk it, and it sounds okay. So.
Who are your favorite blues singers or players?
Well, players and singers is kind of different. If I had to pick one favorite blues player, that would be a tough one, but it would probably be player. I think there's a guy, nobody's going to have heard of this guy, except if you do, hats off to you, but there's a guy named Hubert Sumlin, who is the guitar player for Howlin' Wolf, who didn't know who he was when I first heard him. I heard him on a record, and I was it was Killing Floor, which our band plays, and I heard him do that little riff, din, 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 and I was like, wow, that's, who does that? And that's how I discovered Hubert Sumlin. And he's a guy who never got famous, which is amazing because he's such an incredible guitar player. Like a lot of those old blues guys, he didn't get famous, but the British guys that came along after and copied his stuff, they got famous. Some of them gave him credit and some of them didn't. But he was he's still like a big influence on me. I listen to him. I like Muddy Waters a lot. Howlin' Wolf, Muddy Waters. I'm forgetting a bunch. Those are the big ones. There's a guy. I almost have to. I gotta look at some of the songs we do. Jimmy Rogers is one of my all-time favorites, which a lot of people haven't heard of Jimmy Rogers either. T-Bone Walker. I'd have to say out of all of them, the best guitar player is probably T-Bone Walker. If you ever get a chance to listen to T-Bone Walker, he's just incredible. And he's another one that, if you ever hear an interview with Eric Clapton or Keith Richards, they're all T-Bone Walker's name is gonna come up. He's one of those people that nobody has heard of except guitar players, and blues guitar players in particular. So if I could play like anybody, I'd want to play like T-Bone Walker probably. So.
I was pretty impressed with Oprah Rose when she first came into the group.
Me too.
I am planning on doing a Hot Chocolate with Paul interview with her. We just have to set a date and time.
Yeah. She's the opposite of me in that I think the thing I admire the most about her is she'll be the first to tell you she knows nothing about music. She knows no music theory, never took a lesson in her life. She's just naturally talented. Like when you hear her sing, her range and all that is fantastic. And she wouldn't know, an A chord from a F sharp chord from a, she jokes around about it. She just has natural talent. Whereas on the opposite, I feel like I kind of have to work at it. And everybody in the band's a little different. It's kind of funny because I'm sort of in between. There's Opal, who knows nothing about music and is just raw talent. I think there's Greg, who is he knows about music. He knows about music theory. He can read sheet music, which I'm very bad at. And then I'm sort of in between. I know a little bit of music theory. I can read music not very well. I mostly play by ear, sort of a combination. So I feel like I sit in that little place between all the musicians I've met. You're either, sort of what I consider classically trained, where you can read sheet music and you can, I'm trying to think, it's more like the head than the heart, and Opal's more the heart, where it's all, doesn't read sheet music, doesn't know anything about music theory, but has a fantastic talent. And then I fit kind of in the middle, where I have a little, I think, I don't know that I really have talent. I feel like I have to work really hard at it. I'm not sure I have natural talent, but I do play by ear a lot. Like I can listen to something, after years of doing it, I can listen to a song. And actually, right before you got here, I was listening to a Muddy Waters song I wanted to do. And generally, I'll just, I have a little app that if I run the song through my iPhone, it'll tell me what the chords are, what the main chords of the song are. And then from there, I'll just do it by ear. I'll listen to it and I'll figure out, where the changes are and all that stuff. So everybody's got their own technique.
Yeah.
Are you like a ear learner? Like, do you?
Yeah, I listen to music intently, and I know I just filled in on a gig with you, and you guys commented about me not losing it.
Yeah, we haven't played with you in several months.
Yeah.
So we assumed you'd be a little rusty, but you really weren't.
Yeah, but I guess the way I describe it is once a song is in my head and I have a pattern for how to play it on the drums, it stays with me.
Do you think it's like muscle memory?
Something like that, yeah.
Because I think I have that too with, actually this is an embarrassing story, but I'll tell it anyway. Probably 2 or 3 years ago, I have a nephew, Mike, who's a very talented guitar player, and he hosts an open mic in Buffalo. So my wife and I were visiting, and they invited us to the open mic. I wasn't planning on playing, and I'm in the audience and I'm listening to everything, and my nephew Mike is like, "Uncle Doug, you got to play a song. You're going to come out and play a song, blah blah." And I'm like, "Okay." I had had a couple of beers, and okay, against my better judgment, I decided to. And he had an acoustic up on stage, and it was one of those big dreadnought ones, like much larger than the one that I have, and that's when I realized how much of it is muscle memory, because I got up there and I started playing a song I know, and it's coming out completely wrong. I'm like, I'm hitting a D chord. I'm not. It's people are making faces in the audience looking at me, and I'm realizing that because that guitar is slightly bigger and my fingers, it's all muscle memory. I'm just putting my fingers where they would go on that guitar, and completely different sounds are coming out because I'm hitting the wrong strings. And it was terrible, and people were real polite, and everybody did the little clap and everything, but I was completely mortified. And I realized after that, like, how much of it is muscle memory, which is why I'm not like big on switching guitars in the middle of sets and stuff either, because it's so if the guitar is slightly different, I have to practice with it before I'm comfortable, because I'm just doing everything on autopilot,
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
One thing that kind of amazes me is how music works in the brain. I know of a couple of situations of people who developed Alzheimer's disease, and Tony Bennett would be my best example. I read a story some time ago. This is when Tony was still alive, that the Alzheimer's was bad enough in him that a lot of times he didn't know who he was talking to. It could be his wife, could be somebody in the family, he didn't know who they were. But have somebody sit down at a piano and start playing one of his songs, and he's right there.
Yeah.
It brings him back. And I know there's a couple other situations
it's like a part of the brain that gets activated. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, so music.
That'll be me someday. Somebody will strum a chord and I'll start.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's kind of nice to know that even if you get to that point, everybody gets to, who knows what's going to happen as you age, but there's some of you left in there. I can't remember her name. Jalissa, probably see her on Facebook. She's a lady who sings the old songs from the 40s and 50s, and she goes to the senior facilities. And I've seen she's posted where people walk up to her and think that she's one of the Andrews sisters or something. They're not quite all there, but that music like triggers something in them, and their memories and things like that, and they're like their old selves for a little while, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. So we've got some music on the website, which was recorded right here in this room.
That's true. Yeah, well, we really need to do some more. Right now, we're kind of a live band, and we don't really record much. But we need more stuff for our website, because one of the things when we're booking gigs and everything, obviously people want to hear you. And right now on our website, it's mostly videos that people are nice enough to do with their phones. So they're not the greatest quality. So we have 2 songs. I think we spent like 2 evenings here recording some stuff, and out of that we got 2 decent songs, which I guess isn't terrible, but we need more. We need to do more samples. We're in the early stages of figuring out how to record decent.
What other types of music do you like?
No other types. No. No, I'm just kidding. I like classic rock. I'm okay with, certain... You probably, over here, I actually have an autographed Cheap Trick album cover that was autographed by Rick Nielsen, the guitar player. Interesting story behind you, there's a Bruce Springsteen album, Born to Run, and I worked at Kodak for 19 years. And we used to have a lot of visitors, photographers in town would stop by. And the guy that shot that cover, his name's Eric Miola. He's a New York photographer, and he was in Rochester one day and he stopped into Kodak. And for the life of me, I could not find, I knew he was coming. People said, hey, Eric Miola's coming. And a lot of people didn't know who he was. I knew who he was. And I knew that he photographed that Bruce Springsteen album. So I said, I need him to sign my Bruce Springsteen album. And I tore this house apart looking for that thing. Could not find it. So he ended up not autographing it. I never did find it. I ended up buying another one. But he was a real nice guy, because I told him when I got there, I told him the story. I said, I've been looking everywhere for my Springsteen album, so you could sign it. And he said, well, mail it to me. I'll sign it for you and mail it back. And I never did. But yeah, he was one. I was, in my other life, before I was a guitar player, I was a photographer for many years. Photographed portraits and weddings and a fair amount of bands over the years. So before guitar players started becoming my heroes, all my heroes were photographers, and Eric Miola was one of my heroes, partly because of that cover, which is one of my favorite album covers. I used to be really into, I have a whole book of classic album covers, just from the perspective of the photographers that did the work and the photography part of it, which I thought was pretty fascinating. Mm-hmm. So that was my other big thing. I gave up on it. I think when I turned about 40, the photography got really stressful. It was just like stressful. When I was younger, I handled it better, but especially, things like weddings where, as you got the mother of the bride, you got the stress got too much for me, and I said I need to not do that for a living and just find a fun hobby. So the guitar is my fun hobby now. Yeah. My dad did all that artwork. That's the only other interesting thing I can think of. My dad was an artist. I was never a good artist, which is why I think I became a photographer, because I couldn't draw or paint.
Did you get into digital photography, or did you quit before that became a thing?
I was actually a pretty early adopter of digital photography. I was one of the first people I know at Kodak that embraced it, because, as you know, like a lot of people at Kodak did not embrace digital. They were very late, and when Kodak started coming out with digital cameras, a lot of my fellow photographer friends wanted nothing to do with them. They would strictly go with film, and they would always tell me film's better quality, blah, blah, blah. But the thing I never really understood about that, and still don't, I'll probably offend some of my friends if they ever hear this, but they would always say, well, film's better quality than digital. And that was true initially. But digital kept getting better and better, and film is pretty much a stagnant technology. It hasn't changed in 60 years, at least. And I knew that digital would one day surpass film, and I think it's gotten to that point. Digital has surpassed film in quality. So I was never a snob about it. As soon as, the other thing that folks would tell me is when I started photographing weddings digitally pretty early on, when most of my colleagues were still using film, and they always just say the same thing. I remember somebody telling me, well, if you look under a loop, you can see the difference, and film's better. And I was like, if I can put up a 16 by 20 print and my customer can't tell the difference, what do I care if it looks better under loop? If my customer's not looking at it under loop. So as soon as it got to the point where my customer couldn't tell the difference, I was like, I don't have to bring it to the photo lab. I don't have to, I can mess with it in Photoshop and switch heads out and I still do a lot of that actually. I'll let you in on a little secret. If you look at our band's website, if you look at the photo that we use on all our posters, if you look at Gordy, and he doesn't know this either, Gordy's looking like this. In the original photo, he's like this. And I swapped his head out from another picture just because I could, so I think digital. I think digital is the best. Yeah, I don't really miss film. I know a lot of people are purists. So.
Yeah, you could say that for a lot of different.
Oh yeah,
a lot of different
45s
things.
versus CDs and
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for joining me on Hot Chocolate
Sure,
with Paul for
appreciate
today.
it. Anytime. I'll talk about myself all day. You know that. So, no problem there. Thanks. Yeah, I'm sure we'll see you again. One of these days you'll be up on the bandstand with us again. So.
Yeah.